Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into a topic we all experience, but let's be honest, rarely celebrate, failure.
Mhm.
But instead of seeing it as just, a roadblock, we're going to explore how it can actually be a really powerful engine for learning and growth.
Exactly.
Think of this as your shortcut, maybe, to understanding how to turn those stumbles into, well, leaps forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've given us a fantastic collection of material to work with today. We've got everything from articles on building resilient companies to some really insightful perspectives on why setbacks are just so crucial for personal development.
Right.
So our goal is really to synthesize all of this for you, the learner, so you can start to see those moments when things don't quite go your way in, hopefully, a completely new light.
Okay, let's get right into this then. This idea of redefining failure, because this came up massively across several of our sources.
It really did.
Mimi Scheib, in her article, points out how our traditional view of failure is often tied to punishment or, disappointment,
Yeah, the negative stuff.
which honestly can just make you want to avoid taking risks altogether.
Totally. It's paralyzing.
But she makes this really compelling case for shifting our perspective, to see failure as an essential part of the journey to success. It's not the opposite of success, it's actually woven right in.
And what's interesting is how this idea pops up elsewhere, too. Vanessa Ooms, in her video, she frames it very simply. Failure isn't final.
Right.
It's fundamentally feedback. It's just telling you pretty clearly what didn't quite work this time around.
Feedback, I like that.
And the Substack post we looked at really echoes this. It calls failure a data point, not a dead end.
A data point.
Like a scientist.
Exactly. Like running an experiment and getting a result. Maybe it wasn't the result you wanted, but it's still incredibly valuable information for the next try, for the next iteration.
Right. And that Substack piece really hits on something crucial, I think. That mindset shift. Failure isn't a reflection of you as a person. It's just part of the process. Now, that can be a tough one to really internalize, can't it? Oh, absolutely. It's so easy to feel like we are the failure when something goes wrong. It's a very natural human response.
Yeah.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, like the article from Whippy School highlights, actually encountering failure is one of the steps towards success.
Towards it, not away from it.
Precisely. Working through those struggles, wrestling with a problem, that actually leads to a much deeper, more lasting understanding and mastery. It's almost like you haven't truly grasped something until you've had to overcome some kind of hurdle related to it.
Okay, so it sounds like adopting this new way of looking at failure, this feedback perspective, can actually unlock some pretty significant benefits for us as individuals, but also maybe for teams or whole companies.
Definitely. Shaib mentions that a positive failure culture, basically, where it's okay to not get things right the first time, that actually fuels innovation.
How so?
Well, because people feel safer to experiment, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Psychological safety.
Exactly. And it naturally promotes continuous learning and adaptation because you're constantly getting that feedback we just talked about. You learn, you adjust, you try again.
Right. And if we bring in the USU extension piece, that touches on Carol Dweck's growth mindset work.
Yeah, the growth mindset.
Crucial stuff.
It suggests that when you view setbacks not as signs of your limits, but as like necessary stepping stones for learning, it actually increases your motivation and your resilience. You believe you can grow, so failure becomes a challenge, not proof you're flawed.
Precisely. It reframes the whole experience. Instead of I failed, it's this approach didn't work. What can I learn?
Exactly. Learning and then hopefully bouncing back stronger. Sheb also points out that a more accepting attitude towards failure builds both resilience and creativity.
Makes sense. If you're not constantly worried about getting it wrong.
Yeah. You're much more likely to think outside the box, try those less conventional solutions. Plus, she makes a really good point that this kind of environment can even help attract and keep talented people. Oh, for sure. Who wouldn't want to work somewhere they feel they can actually learn and grow without this constant fear hanging over them?
And the Whippy School article adds another layer here. It notes that when you work through a struggle and eventually succeed, it develops a real sense of pride, accomplishment.
And that builds confidence.
Exactly. It strengthens your confidence to face whatever comes next. And the T3 blog adds a personal development angle, too.
Right. They talk about how embracing failure encourages a more positive attitude overall.
Yeah, boosts motivation, increases self-confidence, helps you figure out your strengths.
Gives you a clear sense of purpose, even improves career prospects and builds loyalty. It's like this cascading positive effect.
Okay, so we're starting to see failure not as this, dreaded outcome, but as this valuable feedback mechanism with some real potential upsides.
Yeah.
But how do we actually do that? How do we process failure in a way that lets us tap into those benefits?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The Substack post offers a really practical first step. Analyze the failure objectively.
Objectively, meaning try to take the emotion out of it.
Exactly. Step back from that immediate gut reaction, that disappointment or frustration. The author emphasizes detachment. Try to observe the situation almost like an outsider would.
Oh.
They suggest asking yourself some very specific questions. What exactly went wrong? Was it the strategy? Was it timing? Preparation?
Hmm.
And crucially, what parts were actually within your control and what were just external factors you couldn't influence?
Right, that control piece is important.
Definitely. And they suggest writing it all down, almost like you're creating a little case study. It helps bring clarity and pinpoints the real contributing factors.
And they gave that example of a failed product launch, which I thought was helpful.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Instead of just, throwing your hands up and saying, well, that bombed,
Right.
you actually dig into the specifics, like was there really market demand? Was our messaging off? Did we target the wrong people? Was the price wrong? Getting into the nitty-gritty.
Precisely. And the Whitby School article reinforces this idea too, talking about backtracking through mistakes, sort of reverse engineering the problem.
Like taking apart a machine to see why it broke.
Exactly. It leads to a much deeper understanding of how things actually work, rather than just discarding it in frustration.
Okay, so analysis first. Then what? Several sources mention taking ownership, right? Accountability.
Yes, and this can be a delicate area, like you said earlier, because failure feels personal.
Yeah, it stings.
But the Substack post makes a really crucial distinction. Taking ownership without assigning blame or feeling shame.
Okay, how does that work?
Well, Shabe also talks about this in a healthy failure culture. Individuals take responsibility for their actions and the outcomes. But the main focus is always on finding solutions and learning, not on pointing fingers.
So it's not about saying, I'm a failure.
No. The Substack piece frames it as owning your role empowers you to change the outcome next time. Recognizing your part isn't labeling yourself. It's acknowledging your agency, your ability to learn and improve.
Okay, that makes sense. It's about empowerment, not shame.
Exactly.
Which leads us very naturally then to actually extracting the lessons. Scheib calls failure a goldmine of lessons.
A gold mine. I like that.
Yeah, she urges us to really dissect what happened, analyze those factors, and actively pull out insights that can help us make better decisions going forward.
And what's really powerful here is that shift in focus. It's moving from the negative event itself to the positive learning that can come out of it.
Right.
The Substack post suggests asking some really insightful questions too, like, what did this teach me about myself, my capabilities, maybe my limitations?
Okay.
What new skills or knowledge do I realize I need? What assumptions did I make that turned out to be wrong?
Mm-hmm. Assumptions can trip you up.
Big time. And maybe most importantly, what specific actions would I take differently next time? That's how disappointment transforms into wisdom.
And they gave that example of a failed job interview, right? The lessons might be about better preparation or maybe practicing your storytelling.
Yeah, getting better at explaining your experience. And the USU Extension piece also emphasizes reflection. Actively thinking about past experiences, even the bad ones, is crucial for resilience.
How so?
That pause lets your brain process, untangle things, consider different interpretations, and ultimately create meaning. And that meaning is the learning. They specifically say, analyze what went wrong, identify areas to improve.
Okay, so identify the lessons.
Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
you have to actually use them, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not just an academic exercise.
Absolutely not. The Substack post is really clear on this. You need to take that new knowledge and make concrete changes to your strategy, your behavior, maybe even your underlying mindset.
Like create an action plan.
Pretty much, develop a clear plan based on what you learned. They outline this really useful cycle. Try something.
Fail or succeed.
Right. Then reflect and learn.
Adjust and improve.
And then try again, but smarter this time. It's this ongoing loop of experimentation and refinement that really drives growth.
That cycle seems key for building resilience too, which came up a lot.
Definitely. Shai points out that when you have a healthier relationship with failure, it loses its power to paralyze you.
You're more willing to bounce back.
Exactly. The USU Extension defines resilience as adapting well to adversity. They even suggest goal setting helps build confidence and resilience.
How? Like setting big goals.
Actually, they suggest starting small. Achievable goals create direction and purpose, building momentum. And cultivating that proactive mindset helps you face future challenges with more confidence.
Makes sense. Small wins build confidence.
And the Substack post adds that resilience is also about just keeping going, even when it hurts emotionally.
Yeah, failure can be painful.
For sure. So it involves detaching your self-worth from the outcome, leaning on your support network, practicing self-compassion.
Being kind to yourself.
Yes. And keeping focused on the bigger picture. Success is rarely that smooth, straight line upwards, you know? There are always bumps.
Oh, definitely. And the Whitby School article had that great story about the students making slime.
Yes, the slime fundraiser.
They just kept failing, right? Recipe after recipe didn't work. Too sticky, too hard.
But they kept going. Because they were determined, they believed in their idea, they showed incredible resilience.
And eventually they figured it out and sold out. It's a perfect little example of just pushing through those setbacks.
It really is. That determination, that belief, it matters.
Okay, so resilience is huge. Now, another really crucial element seems to be feedback. Giving it, receiving it.
Absolutely. Shabe emphasizes that transparency around failures, sharing those experiences creates a supportive environment, collective growth.
Right, and she frames constructive feedback as a gift for improvement.
Yeah, which is a great way to think about it. And celebrating effort, the learning process itself, not just the final win, supporting others through their failures too.
And the USU extension piece mentioned the growth mindset again here, being positive about feedback. But the Asana article, that one really got into the practicalities, didn't it?
Oh yeah, Asana had some really detailed practical guidance. They stressed that constructive criticism needs to be specific.
Not vague.
Right. Actionable. Focused on improvement, not personal attacks. Delivered with good intentions. Ideally, you even brainstorm solutions together.
What were some of their specific tips for giving feedback?
Okay, so they suggested using I statements, I observed, rather than you did.
Focuses on your perspective.
Exactly. They also advised against that old feedback sandwich, positive, negative, positive.
Oh, yeah. That always feels a bit forced, doesn't it?
It can. They say just focus on clear, specific suggestions for improvement. Share it privately, include genuine, positive comments where appropriate, but don't force it.
Make it a conversation, not a lecture.
Right. And give it promptly, but maybe take a beat to gather your thoughts first. Keep the tone friendly.
Okay, and what about being on the receiving end? That can be tough, too.
Definitely. Asana advises resisting that urge to react defensively. Just breathe.
Easier said than done sometimes.
True. But try to remember it can actually help you grow. Actively listen to understand, not just to form your response.
Listen to understand. Okay.
Connect the feedback to your role or the task, not to you as a person. Thank the giver for their time. Ask clarifying questions if you need to, but don't get argumentative right then and there.
That takes practice, I bet.
For sure. And the T3 blog also highlighted how feedback helps you understand your strengths and weaknesses for personal growth. Help set goals, see your impact. It's all connected.
It really is all about getting better, isn't it?
Yeah.
And speaking of getting better, but maybe on a bigger scale, the A Priori article introduced that really interesting concept, failure as a service. Yes.
That was fascinating. This is more at the organizational level for tech platforms.
Right, where they intentionally cause failures, like break things on purpose.
Sort of, in a controlled way, yeah. They might stop virtual machines, crash software containers, add network delays, things like that.
Why on earth would they do that?
To see how the system handles it. To proactively find weaknesses before they cause a real disaster. It's like stress testing the infrastructure.
Okay, so it's proactive resilience building.
Exactly. Instead of waiting for things to break unexpectedly, they analyze how the system behaves under controlled stress, manage the damage, and build better disaster recovery plans. It seems counterintuitive, maybe, but the goal is a much more reliable system overall.
So it's different from, like, security testing.
Yeah, they mention it's complementary. Penetration testing is usually about finding security holes, whereas FOSS is more about performance and stability when things go unexpectedly wrong.
Wow. Okay, so whether it's us as individuals or these big complex systems, learning from failure is clearly powerful. And a lot of making that happen seems to come down to leadership and culture, right?
Absolutely. Scheib really emphasizes this. When leaders openly talk about their own mistakes and setbacks,
It sets the tone.
exactly, it signals that vulnerability and growth are valued. Creating that psychological safety we mentioned earlier where people feel safe to take risks without fear is crucial.
Leaders need to walk the talk.
Definitely. Leading by example, acknowledging shortcomings, supporting calculated risks, addressing failure constructively with curiosity and empathy, not blame.
And the Asana article echoed this too, didn't it? About establishing that culture of constructive feedback.
Yeah, leaders modeling it, normalizing it, emphasizing growth, encouraging peer-to-peer feedback, even training people on how to give good feedback, communication, listening, emotional intelligence, focusing on behavior, setting clear expectations around it all.
And just to really drive the point home, the Substack post reminded us of some famous examples, didn't it?
Yeah.
People who failed spectacularly before they succeeded.
Right. Like Thomas Edison and the light bulb, thousands of attempts, apparently.
Wow. And J.K. Rowling getting rejected so many times for Harry Potter.
12 rejections, and Michael Jordan, of course, that famous quote about failing over and over again being why he succeeds.
I've failed over and over. That is why I succeed. Those stories really put our own little setbacks into perspective, don't they?
They really do. They're powerful reminders that the path isn't usually straight, and embracing those challenges, learning from missteps. That's often part of the deal for high achievers.
Okay, so to quote and bring this all together for you, the learner, we've dug into how looking at failure through these different lenses consistently shows it to be actually an incredibly valuable catalyst for learning, for adapting, and yeah, ultimately for success.
By consciously choosing to see failure not as like a final judgment, but as essential feedback.
Right, and taking time to analyze it objectively, with some detachment.
Owning our part without falling into shame.
And really digging deep to extract those key lessons hidden inside the experience.
We can actively turn those setbacks into setups for real growth.
And building resilience, that ability to bounce back and keep going, is just so vital.
Absolutely. Managing emotions, leaning on support, keeping that long-term perspective. Knowing setbacks are usually temporary.
And fostering a culture, whether it's just in our own heads or in a team, where giving and receiving constructive feedback is normal, even welcomed.
Yeah.
That's essential too.
For sure. And even that FAFA idea shows how proactively engaging with potential failure can build stronger systems.
Okay, so as you take some time to maybe mull over this deep dive, here's a thought. Consider a recent challenge you faced, something that didn't quite go as planned.
We all have them.
Totally. But instead of just focusing on the disappointment or whatever, try applying some of these frameworks we talked about today. Ask yourself, what specific feedback is this failure actually offering me right now?
What's the data point?
Exactly. And then what's maybe just one small, actionable adjustment you could make based on that insight as you move forward? Just remember, your learning journey, it's ongoing. And these experiences, especially the tough ones, when you really embrace them and understand them, they'll probably become some of your most valuable teachers.
That's a really important point to end on. We really hope this deep dive has maybe given you a fresh perspective on failure and hopefully some practical tools and insights you can use to leverage it for your own growth and development from here on out.